Hi everyone, this is Niall from nocode.tech and you're watching the first video in a series of interviews that we're going to do around no-code tools and the people who built them. So I'm here with David Siegel, who is the founder and CEO of Glide. And if you've not seen it already, Glide is a really cool, really easy to use mobile app builder. And I was about to say, usually the way it works is you put your data in a Google Sheet and that turns into a database. You can then use Glide to build a mobile app on top of it. But I think I'm right in saying, David, that's changing very quickly. You've got your own database now, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. And I'm so honored that I'm the first. I didn't know that I was your guinea pig,
Yeah,
but I love it.
yeah, no, totally. So but we'll start with the basics. Can you
Sure.
give me just a kind of bit of background in yourself? You know what you've been up to and how did kind of Glide come to be?
Yeah, so I'm here today because I'm the CEO of a no-code company called Glide, and we actually don't refer to it as no-code too often, and we can talk about that. And I'm the CEO of that company because I've always loved creating technology, and I loved computers, and I spent the last 10 years or so working in the developer tools space. I worked on open source software. I worked on tools for developers writing code to build their own apps. And I met some really talented colleagues along the way. And we just are fascinated with this problem because we all love using software and we think it's interesting and we like how technology is changing how we experience the world. And we wanted to make it better. And one of the worst things about the software we use every day is like how it's made. It's just extremely difficult to create. And the best is when you have like beautiful software that you love using and it's well designed and it makes you more productive. But like inside, like the story behind how that is made is like a sausage factory. And insides are very scary and it takes decades to become great enough at engineering to make that kind of great software. So yeah, my colleagues and I just dreamed of making this process better somehow, this process of creating software better. And we usually worked on that for developers. Like, how do we make better tools for developers so they can collaborate better, they can test their code better, they can maybe generate code and they don't have to write so much. The project that directly preceded Glide, that we refer to as Glide's mother, is a tool for programmers. It's like a low-level code generation tool. So yeah, we were just working in that vein. And we said, like, how can we keep elevating this concept? And I personally wanted, as my customers or as the users of the product, I wanted a broader audience than just technical people. So we said, we love creating software. We want tools to make it better. We would like if those tools were accessible to as wide of an audience as possible. And then it just evolved into what Glide is today. And Glide it's very much what you said. You start with a Google Sheet and we help you build a mobile app out of it. And we're slowly expanding the bounds of that concept because our ultimate vision is a very general purpose, data-driven programming product for making all kinds of software, from websites to maybe software that doesn't even have a user interface, maybe like back-end software automations, but with this data-driven approach. So we're expanding the Google Sheet side of the story to include our own data store and then eventually third-party ones. And then we're expanding the artifact side, the thing you produce with it, to larger and larger screen sizes. We just started with mobile because it's a simplification and there's more constraints, and we can put it in the middle of if you have a 12-inch laptop, we can like put the phone on it. You can see it. It's very hard to design like a full website on a smaller screen. And yeah, we're expanding outwards. And yeah, that's my background. That's why I'm here. That's what Glide is.
Awesome, that's really cool. And I think you're spot on when you say, it's best to kind of bite off a small chunk at a time. I speak to a lot of different no-code tool founders, as you can imagine, and everybody's always kind of trying to start somewhere, work their way up, because it's such a big problem to tackle. And I think we're so,
Yeah.
no-code has been around for a very long time, and no-code is this kind of more recent trend, has probably been around since kind of 2018. But I think that whole research and development phase, or phase, sorry, of how do you really gain a proper, almost academic understanding of building software that builds other software? I think that's still absolutely in its infancy. And so one of the things that you mentioned there is you don't necessarily call it no code. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we just have a very broad perspective on what software is and how it's made, and we view software as this complex medium that involves more than code. And specifically, we view software as design plus code or design plus computation. So Glide is as much a no design tool as it is a no code tool, because and that's still a huge simplification of what software is. There's a whole life cycle behind software, but where we're interested in sort of the total process of software creation, including its design, its distribution. And we think that a lot of the no code tools are just focused on the like eliminating traditional programming from the equation. And we're not even opposed to things that look like traditional programming in principle. Like traditional programming I would describe as like you type text documents and the text is sort of in a formal language it's very easy to make a typo and the typo can ruin the whole thing. That's like traditional programming. There's a lot of aspects of that that are really valuable and very powerful. So someday, we might have an interface that looks like that. We're mostly just, we're just taking a broader perspective of how do we improve the whole process from designing your app to sharing it to making the technical and the data parts of it work. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so, you've stated that you're on your website and in many other places that your company's kind of mission is to create the next billion software developers by 20. And I guess to do that, it's going to have to be a lot more than mobile. There's going to be a complete, redefinition of kind of programming as we know it to achieve that. And so,
Yeah.
how did you guys kind of settle on that as a mission? Why does that kind of motivate you and sort of how does that shape the company?
Honestly, to be frank, I was like, what's a mission that's going to inspire people and sound really impressive? At first, we had make it easy and fun for anyone to build amazing apps without code was our mission. That's now our vision. Make it easy and fun for anyone to make amazing software. We've de-emphasized the apps and the without code part because those aren't so crucial. Like the easy and fun and anyone and amazing and software are the core aspects of that. But at one point, like Glide was like 3 or 4 months old, and we had something that made it easy and fun for anyone to build kind of amazing stuff. It was very limited, but it was like still amazing. And you didn't have to write any code. And I was like, did we do the mission already? Like maybe we need something more specific. So I was like, okay, it's got to have a big number and it should have a deadline. And then we were just like, okay, there's a billion spreadsheet users and we think we can like make them software developers. So we came up with this, create a billion new software developers by 2030. And this could change, but we also like the perspective, it's more about the ability, the people we're changing and the ability we're creating in the world and less about, we want to make the best no code product you've ever gone to or something like that. It's more outward facing, less about us and more about the world change. So that's how we came up with it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think as I sort of mentioned earlier, these products are so heavy in R&D. You need really smart engineers to build them. I think it can be really easy to get trapped in the how do we make the most Turing complete software builder? How do you just make it be able to do the nth degree? But if people
Yes.
use it, then it's not going to work. And actually, it's amazing even amongst the tools that I would consider sort of beginner entry level. There's then a difference between okay, can someone who's not great with computers use it? Can someone who they can use Microsoft Office, they can browse the internet, use it, and then there's almost a spectrum right up to okay, could my mother use it? Could my grandmother use it? As you go, almost all these different demographics who could have
Yeah.
ideas about software and they kind of want to build them. And so, how do you guys over the next few years? And this will be a scary question, but how do you see yourselves achieving that?
That's a great question. So yeah, I think that there are a lot of styles of approach to this problem of making a general purpose and powerful software creation platform that's kind of next generation.
Mm.
And we were very explicit from the beginning about what we were motivated by, what our goals were, and what our goals were not. And sort of universal power, we crossed out immediately. We're like, we think we're going to make a tool that cannot build in principle any type of software. We think that's too broad to start with. So it's going to be severely limited. But if we limit it to like most of the apps that people want to build, like maybe that's like a good middle ground. Like, can we build 80% of the most important apps? And we can just say there's a whole class of software that we won't be able to achieve. And yeah, you mentioned like I think Turing completeness, and that was something we said. This is not motivating us.
Mm.
Turing completeness, which is not a hard property to introduce into your system, and maybe it's hard to make it intelligible for people who don't have sort of the abstract reasoning ability that software developers have. But we were motivated by creating something easy and fun. We're like, we want this tool to be easy and fun. When you ask someone how they feel after they use Glide, they should tell you they had fun, and they should tell you it was easy. And so yeah, we're very specific about what our guiding principles are as far as values in the design of the tool. But we still need to like always move this frontier forward of Glide's power and capabilities. And that is the design process. That's the R&D process. So what we do is we hire creative people who are sort of flexible thinkers, who are interested in this problem and sort of value aligned with us. And we brainstorm and we make prototypes and we do sketches and we sometimes we contribute goofy ideas. And that's been really a rewarding way. My co-founder Mark has really helped structure a lot of our thought experiments and our way of thinking about this, because he's very much about like embracing prototyping and mistakes and the inevitability of new problems. So yeah, we're always just trying to like make more mistakes and learn more, and just not be ivory tower at all about it. Encounter a lot of people who want to brainstorm with us about programming tools, and there's a very strange obsession with like the history and the patriarchs and matriarchs of like this is sort of Byzantine history of tools for thought and new approaches to programming. And we're just trying to be as practical as we can be. We want people to like make something today, put a smile on their face, be useful. So yeah, we're trying to balance this. We're trying to have that balance between sort of theory and power and then just like delight in practice.
Yeah, I like that. It's kind of, let's worry less about the grand philosophy and the grand plan, and actually just keep, coming up with new ways around the solutions. Just trying to make
Yeah.
it in the ground. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, my external observation is, I think you guys have been around now 3 years, is it?
2 years.
You guys seem like you're moving incredibly quickly. It seems like that kind of pragmatism is coming through. Where are you now in regards to? So you're trying to hit 1 billion. You started at zero. Where are you now?
We're almost 1% complete.
Right, that's 1 million.
Oh, yeah. You mean in terms of on our track to creating 1 billion developers? Yeah. Where are we on that? We're not at a million new developers yet, at least active. But we are making a significant progress towards our goal, and at our rate of growth, we think it's well on target. In fact, I think we'll have to actually create even more humans to keep up with. If our growth rate continues, we're going to have to increase the world population to like have room for all of the software developers. So yeah, we're making great progress, and much faster than we feared. It's going really well. People are reacting really well, and it's been amazing how it's changed our view of what software is and who makes it, because we kind of had this abstract hope that this was a good idea.
Mm.
We're like, normal people making software, non-technical people making software. And in the early days, very savvy people would push back and they would say, what makes you think that non-technical people even want to do that? And we weren't sure. A lot of it was wishful thinking. And then as soon as we were able to test it, we found there's overwhelming desire from every type of person you could imagine to create their own software.
Absolutely, and I see that myself. I speak to people every day from all walks of life who are trying to create things, trying to come up with things, and the way I always see it is, I think in this world, a lot of people try to develop some sort of ability to take ideas and express them in the physical world. If you're really keen on art, you might learn to paint, and then you can express your ideas. And I think there are so many people, especially in a world that's completely filled with tech, who have all these ideas about apps and that kind of thing, but for the longest time they've been completely unable to even approach the world of making that possible. I think apps like Glide, you guys are a really great rep for just how accessible you are, how easy and fun, as you say, you are to use. I think there's two things in no code. It's not only allowing people to create software, but it's actually giving them the confidence to even take step one and try it in the first place. The more accessible you can be, I think the easier that becomes.
Yeah, I mean, Just to comment on that, sort of the change in perspective, there's this huge class of people who are not able to create software who want to create it.
Mm.
And then there's a huge class of people who can't create software and think that they don't want to create it. This is a large, huge number of people, and we'll interview them. And it's mostly in the beginning was like our friends and family. We're like, oh, we're working on this thing to make software. Like, would you try it? And they would say like, no, I'm not that type of person. I would never do that.
Mm.
And that is even more special to me because those people end up trying it. And then they're like, I'm obsessed with this and I've made 10 apps. So, the person who dreams of making an app, we let them make an app. That's great. But like the person who thinks it's not for them and doesn't want it, but then is convinced by the utility and the experience is even more compelling.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea. That's really cool. And so, you said an interesting thing a few minutes ago, and when I brought up the kind of, where are you in your journey? You said 1%, and you weren't referring to numbers, so clearly, you have in your head that despite all the progress you've made, despite all the templates I see about Glide and people use it and
Yeah.
apps, clearly you still feel like you're absolutely at the start of this journey. But I actually want to take it back to where I perceived the start. So, you guys have been around, as you say, a couple of years now. I believe you went through Y Combinator, didn't you?
Yeah.
How was that? Did that help? Was that worth doing?
Well, I'll comment on that, but yeah, let me just say how I understood your question about how far we are. This is just like an internal saying we have on the team that like Glide is almost 1% complete because one, we want to create we want to create like the largest software developer tools company with
Mm,
lots of products that help people build all kinds of software, maybe for many different levels of sophistication as well. So a tool for kids making automation all the way to professionals building, robots or something like that. Maybe there's this huge spectrum. And we view Glide's current incarnation as this Google Sheets to mobile app thing as just like the less than 1%. And we expect in 5 years, Glide to be a completely different product and the company to be a completely different type of company. So yeah, we view Glide today as very transitional, transitory. I'm not sure the right word, but just, as one small stepping stone at the very beginning of a much greater journey. And that mindset just helps us not be too precious about Glide in its current form and focus more on the progress. But yeah, Y Combinator we went through Y Combinator in winter 2019, and there's some things they helped us a lot with, and there's some things where I didn't feel it was very useful. I felt we were like a bit of a mature team for Y Combinator because we were four colleagues from Microsoft who had done a startup before. We
mm,
had a pretty strong idea of what we were doing and a vision for how the company could go, and we had only just started. So we had a lot of just sort of the basics of, building prototypes, testing. And I feel like all of the best decisions we made about the company during YC were originated from us.
mm.
I mean, we think we should do this. And then they might say, that sounds good or that doesn't sound good. There was not a lot of clear signal from them when we bounced our ideas. But at least that gave us confidence that, we think we know where we want to go. But yeah, YC was very useful in the fundraising process, which was new for all of us. They do a great job of guiding you through that. And we were also like just a very well connected team. So I knew a lot of investors already who I'd kept up with for years and had great mentors and connections in Silicon Valley. That's if you don't have that, Y Combinator is really valuable for that reason. So yeah, it was a little bit of a give and take, but they've been great partners and we're partnering with them even more. They keep up with us. They're always trying to help. They're extremely useful even after you graduate from the 3-month program.
Yeah. Awesome. That sounds brilliant. And it's interesting to kind of hear a bit of a balanced perspective on it as well. I think especially now when concepts like indie hacking and indeed no code itself, I think it's a lot more accessible today than even maybe it was 5 years ago for people to start companies and not
Yeah.
necessarily access that whole kind of Silicon Valley world, be it Y Combinator. And, on a kind of similar tone, back in the early days, how did Glide kind of find its first customers? How did you guys go from 0 to 1 and get started?
So we built Glide live on the internet. We just set up every time we would make an update in our code repository of like the source code of Glide, it would just go live. And we were constantly passing out the URL and making videos, asking people to try it. And first it was just our friends. And then a couple of blog posts got written about it or a YouTube video, and it grew and started to attract strangers. And yeah, and then I think the first thing we sold, like, oh, you can have your own domain name and we will take off the branding. It won't say Glide anymore. It'll be white labeled. And then yeah, people just wanted that. So they would contact us. I don't even remember how, maybe you would purchase on our website and we would get an email and then we would set it up. But like in the early days, we would like SSH, through a terminal into our cloud provider to like set up your domain name. It was all by hand. So yeah, it was just a very iterative process of doing it live and learning on the way.
Yeah, awesome. And it kind of sounds like you've sort of had users from all walks of life, and when you're talking about getting 1 billion software developers, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a usual kind of piece of startup advice that's given, and probably given at Y Combinator as well, which is, be very, very narrow about who you're going after, be very niche. Actually, in your case, given the mission you're going after, the answer really is everybody. You really are clearly having to
Yeah.
go after a lot of people to kind of achieve that mission. What kind of people are getting the most use out of Glide at the minute, and kind of who are they? What's their background and why is Glide so useful to them?
Yeah. This is something we have to get a lot better at. We need to become much more specific about who our customer is
Hmm.
versus our broad user base. So we love that Glide is free to use, and we have a generous free tier that, anyone from teachers and kids to entrepreneurs in college to people prototyping ideas can use for free. But our view of the business of Glide is that companies building custom internal software for their employees to use will use Glide for that.
Hmm.
And when we started out, we used to call these dark apps because they were kind of not in the app store and they're private to companies, but that has all sorts of nefarious connotations. So now we say apps for work. We see a lot of traction in, the general use cases, like you have people who aren't in an office and they have their mobile devices and you need them to access information in the company and sort of update information. So we call this field ops. So we see, sales enablement, repair, trucking, pickup, drop off, delivery. People, they're not on a laptop, they're in the field, and there's someone in an office somewhere with a spreadsheet usually. And there's an existing workflow where they're calling this person or emailing them, or maybe they have some automations where there's like a form they fill out on a laptop that goes into the spreadsheet eventually and triggers an email. And they have these sort of processes that are, stuck together, and they might have a ticket open with their IT department or their engineering team in the company saying, we could really use a custom software for this workflow that we've kind of put together with spreadsheets and emails. And that ticket is like, okay, yeah, in 2024, we'll work on this project if all these other conditions happen. It's just very low priority. And then these people are non-technical and they have the sheet, and then they try Glide, and all of a sudden 50 employees have it on their phone. They're getting the information. They're taking pictures, scanning barcodes. So yeah, those are the customers that are succeeding the most with Glide. They have those properties. A lot of the public energy around Glide is around people making public facing apps. They're making prototypes, MVPs. They're trying to start a startup. We like that because it creates energy and spreads Glide, but we don't view that as our customer and our where our business is going to grow. We don't want to be the platform for you to make the next Instagram. And we're trying to be more clear about that. We're not a platform to build the next Facebook or a social network with 1 billion users. Just that the business doesn't work out for us to host something like that. And most of those fail anyway. So we're not looking for that type of business, but we welcome people to try.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And are you attracting a lot of kind of enterprise size clients, Fortune 500 type size of companies, or is it more kind of like small, medium businesses? Where's the kind of sweet spot in terms of adoption for internal apps?
Yeah, it's all over the place, but we're mostly trying to talk to companies, with about maybe 1,000 employees right now, because when you start to go, if the company has over 10,000 employees, they have a pretty rigorous process around IT and security, and that can take a long time for us to go through that. And it just sort of naturally, so you as your company grows and your product gets more sophisticated, and you're able to interface with customers with all those requirements, we'll move in that direction. But we started sort of the free hobbyist freemium people, and we talked to a lot of small medium businesses, and we have some enterprise customers that are very large, but we're not focused on them.
Yeah, interesting. I think I work a lot in the kind of enterprise side of no code in my day-to-day life, as well as kind of through nocode.tech, and I think it's a sleeping giant at the minute. I think it's a huge area, completely rife with opportunities for no code solutions, and it's interesting because in my head I'll kind of split the market between, well, these are the the consumer focused tools, your bubbles, your web flows, and I will, split the other half of the market, Betty blocks, all these kind of tools into, well, that's the enterprise side. And, they're the guys that do SSO and audit logs and all that kind of thing that you need in a big company. For Glide, I would usually associate you guys as very much on the consumer side. So it's incredibly interesting to hear that actually you're finding a ton of success across the other side of the fence. I think what you said about the more kind of consumer side users are brilliant for kind of getting the word out. One of the things that I like about Glide is your whole kind of like templates marketplace. Whenever I kind of speak to someone through nocode.tech who's completely new and they might have an idea, I always kind of go have a quick search over there. I spoke to someone the other day who was trying to build an app for logging workouts, and no surprise at all, there was a template for it in Glide. It's there all the time. So you guys sound like you've got a totally different mindset. I speak to a lot of tools and they're very much about the tool and here's what it can do, whereas you guys are like, we've got this problem. This is a tool that's going to solve it today. It might not be the tool that solves it tomorrow. So where do you kind of see yourself differentiating from other app builders in terms of the product? If I decide tomorrow I want to build an app, the product itself, why would I pick Glide over a different app? Where am I going to get the kind of best use case versus a competitor?
So there's a lot I can say about this. There's usually I when I talk about like Glide's differentiation, I talk about data, design, distribution, programming model as like these four areas where we try to be very strong. But that's kind of like a large framework to describe. But Glide is supposed to be a great tool to use. You should enjoy it. And we want to get into companies because employees love using Glide because it's delightful and it works really well. Most of the no-code tools I've tried, and I try a lot of them, are like, they're terrible. They're not good products. They kind of like technically let you accomplish what they claim to do on the homepage, but it's like, you just feel gross after you use it. And it's remarkable that like they seem to persist for years and years and years, some of these bad tools, but we want Glide to just differentiate itself by being the thing that people, they bring to work and they bring to their projects because they love it so much. So we invest so much in design. And I think that's a substantial reason to use Glide over everything else. It's just, it works better and is better to use. But there's an overflow of many other reasons that we think Glide is competitive. So yeah, how we deal with data and how we synchronize with a Google Sheet is a huge advantage. It's actually very hard to make an app scale while syncing with a Google Sheet. And I think in the next week, we're launching our batch updating. So we will, if you have like 100 users simultaneously editing the data, we're able to bundle it together and update the sheet very efficiently so it doesn't bottleneck. There's so many details in sort of synchronizing that I haven't seen any other tool ever do. And maybe it's because like those other tools aren't scaling on Google Sheets, so they're not getting to these problems, but that's one thing that we offer. And our perspective on data, where you're editing it in a big environment that's more like a spreadsheet. It's more immersive. You're not in this narrow little window adding one record after another. We try to give you this data environment that feels pretty familiar and that you want to spend time in. And there's a lot of other technical things that we do in Glide. So like the real-time calculation that happens in the app. So the app is like updating very quickly in response to changes. Most tools don't work that way. You go through a cycle to the back end and back to the front end where you're submitting and you go through a page refresh. Also, if you do want to make a mobile app, Glide includes all of the standard stuff that mobile apps do, like pushing and popping the page when you navigate in the navigation bar and sort of subtly adapting to the platform that it's running on. We're like, no one wants to ever think about this. The users expect it to sort of blend in and work like all the other apps, but a lot of the no-code tools leave you to build it yourself. They're like, okay, you've got page A and page B, and you can put a button here and you press it and it's going to go to B. And it just, it does like a hard cut, and it's not like smooth and natural. So that's another thing we strive for, is this feeling of sort of blending in with the other apps on your phone. We want a Glide app to feel like it could have come pre-installed on your phone. It's that natural in the environment.
Yeah, I love that.
And another thing, one more thing, is like we really want Glide apps to adapt to all the platforms they're running on. So today they started mobile, and if they're on iOS or Android, they kind of switch their appearance to blend in. And now you can make them wide, and they sort of look like a tablet app. That needs a lot of work. But that's another thing. We want one project to kind of scale up to a web page and scale back down to an app. So that's another big advantage.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, it's just back to that mindset that I'm kind of hearing coming out. It's not about visual programming, it's about making it easy to build software. That just feels like it keeps shining through. And so, you guys have been pretty busy recently. Obviously, you brought out your actions functionality, which, lets people kind of build different logic flows, triggers actions, make stuff happen within Glide. It feels like a lot of the focus recently has been really upping what Glide can do. Clearly, we've got an idea of what you guys are trying to achieve in the next decade, but what can we expect to see for Glide in the next kind of year or so? What's the immediate priorities?
We want to invest a lot more in our larger screen layouts. So tablet is, we use this term tablet because it seems like the next thing above a phone layout, but we also acknowledge that tablet apps are not, we don't get a lot of demand for that. People want web. They want, something that feels natural on their laptop or on a PC. So we have some plans for making that possible soon. And we also heard from a lot of customers like, yeah, I use Glide for the field ops app that the employees use, but in the office, they want this thing that's more at home on a desktop. So we're using another tool. And we really would prefer it all to be in Glide, because we like the way that you guys think about the software. So we want to offer that. More data sources. So we want databases and Airtable and Excel, and also improving Glide's built-in one. But we want you to just connect where your company's data is and let you build apps on top of it. Yeah, those are some of the big ones for the next year. And then on the R&D side, we have a couple prototypes, and we continue to make more about how we can make Glide a better data-driven programming environment and more general purpose. We view Glide as so woefully limited, and we need to figure out how we can expand its powers.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's really cool. And how do you, either in the next year, the next few years, what do you kind of see as the broader future for the no code movement as a whole? What are some of the things you see down the line with your unique perspective?
I mean, I don't think my perspective is unique on it. I just think it's fantastic that we're broadening the tent to let all sorts of different people who they didn't have the happy accident of being a geek and having a computer access when they were a child and spending 10 years on it like I did. That was very lucky that I got that opportunity, because those skills have become so valuable. I like that, people with all different types of perspectives and proclivities can make software for the world, because it's how we're telling stories, and it's how we're creating new businesses. And I like that that's becoming so decentralized.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I completely agree with that. And I know the feeling 100%. There was a lot of years that I spent in my bedroom trying to hack computers, trying to program instead of being out riding on a bike. But it worked out. I think there's a lot of us that feel that way. And then so for some of the people who are going to be watching this, a lot of them are on a really similar journey to the one that you're on or have been on. A
Yeah.
lot of people on nocode.tech who are trying to build a business, trying to build an app. And as somebody who has found success through Glide and has a kind of a company that's growing quickly, what are some of the tips or pieces of advice that you might give some of the people watching?
Sure. Well, I don't think we found success yet. Like I said, we're not 1% complete.
Sure.
But gosh, like the most important thing is finding other really great people who you can work with.
Mm.
And because I can't make Glide by myself. Maybe I can make like a really bad one that wouldn't go anywhere. But I spent a lot of time over like the last decade thinking about, I would like to do a company someday, and I need to like find people who would be good to do it with.
Mm.
And I'm so fortunate to have my co-founders and the people who have joined Glide so far. And I lay awake at night as we're trying to hire more people. I'm like, I wish I would have spent more time getting to know these people I remember from my past, and then keeping it in closer touch with them, and maybe we'd be working together already. So yeah, I think there's a lot of really important advice out there about starting a company, but something I don't hear mentioned very much is just the importance of finding great colleagues. And I think it's never too early to think about that, even if it's 10 years before you plan to do your company. And
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Listen, it's been amazing having you on I was going to say podcast there. It's not a podcast. It could be a podcast. But no, really, appreciated that. It's amazing to hear about the mission you're on, and I absolutely love the mindset. So where can the viewers find you and find Glide?
glideapps.com.
Awesome. Awesome. So, yep, much appreciated, and hopefully we'll speak again soon. Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you.